Hi, welcome to another Face Reading Caricature. Today I'm going to be analysing Jeff Bezos, who most recently went up into space 10 inches higher than Sir Richard Branson, who's his kind of arch rival. So we're going to be looking at little characteristics that show up, things that might give us clues as to what's going on inside his mind. The thing that kind of first jumped out at me when I was gathering photos for this video is what's going on here. We've got two very asymmetrical eyes. And there's a lot of asymmetry on his face actually. We've got the one eye small on this side, then he's famously got the bigger eye here. He's also got this sort of crooked smile that goes up on this side and down on this side. And this reminded me of our old friend from an earlier video. It reminded me a little bit of Brian Rose. He's kind of got almost the same asymmetry but on the other side of his face. Like here he's got the kind of Brian Rose has the bigger right eye and the smaller left eye. Jeff Bezos has smaller left eye and the bigger, but they both had that sort of the same crooked smile. This sort of it shows up more on the public side, which I'll be explaining in a moment, and it's more I guess you could say compressed or more repressed on the left side of the face. So what does the asymmetry of the eyes indicate? It's often believed, well, there's two things. It's often believed that if the eye on the right hand side is bigger than the left hand side, this is often someone who knew what their path was early in life and they followed it without much detour, without any particular obstacles in their way. They were sort of focused on what they wanted and they achieved it. And we kind of know this a little bit from Brian Rose because he was a city trader and he managed, his goal was to retire at 40, to make so much money on the stock exchange. He retired at 40 and never worked again, and he was apparently very successful. Whereas if the eye is bigger on this side, on the left hand side, his left hand side, it's often someone who's a bit of a late developer. It's someone who doesn't really, they spend most of their life dealing with personal problems or their more emotional self. And we know from Jeff Bezos, he was from a single parent family. His father abandoned the family when he was just 2 years old. So this is sometimes what the left eye being bigger than the right eye indicates. So if we look at his divided face, if we put the two right sides together, which represents his public side, and we put the two left sides together, which represents his personal, private life, we can kind of see, so it's quite an incredible difference between, and I did it on a few photos just to make sure that I wasn't just imagining it, because sometimes when you do this the photos come out a bit distorted, but every photo you see his public side, he's presenting himself as a kind of almost shy, insecure kind of person. This kind of the thin chin, the thin neck, even the shoulders kind of come down. Everything on his public side suggests kind of a quite weak-willed sort of person, whereas the private side is the opposite. I mean, you look at this, he almost looks like a wrestler or something with this kind of neck and these massive shoulders, especially the wider chin and everything. This is a sign of stubbornness and willpower. He's almost like a completely different person. He's kind of like how on the public side maybe he felt he couldn't express his male side. It was easier for him to be the kind of unassuming person that people kind of underestimated, the sort of like the quieter, more agreeable sort of person, whereas the wider eyes are kind of more this sort of gregarious social side, which maybe he felt he couldn't express. He felt he had to repress that side. It's interesting. Sometimes where the ears are set on the head indicates that someone might have neurological problems. It is believed sometimes that the lower down the ear, the more likely they were to have some kind of developmental problems. Now, I don't think that's the case with Jeff Bezos. He's obviously a highly intelligent kind of guy, and by all accounts he was like a grade A student and he was very good at what he did. So I don't think in his case that counts, but it is a sign that someone often comes into their own later in life. They find a path, they become successful later in life, And that's kind of what the lower down ear. This is, I guess, why it's correlated sometimes with a lack of intelligence. But certainly in his case, that's not applicable at all. He's obviously a very intelligent man. He's got a sort of slightly receding chin. Not dramatically, but this is a sign. It was believed that it was someone who was downtrodden in their early life and who later comes to the rescue of others. I don't think that's the case with him. He doesn't really seem to give a toss about other people, but I found out recently that people with receding chins are more likely to have been mouth breathers as children, and it means that the top half of if you breathe through your mouth, your tongue is often too low down for the top row of your teeth to form around it, so you end up with a very narrow face. And because your face is too narrow, your mouth doesn't shut properly and you don't breathe properly. And this comes from a book called Breathe by a guy called James Nestor, and I've only recently discovered this, and it's a kind of crazy thing. It would explain a little bit of Jeff Bezos's kind of adenoidal sounding voice. He sounds like he can't speak very clearly. You know, he hasn't got necessarily a speech impediment, but he's very nasal in how he talks.
We live on this beautiful planet. It's the most beautiful planet in the solar system by far, and we have to keep it safe and protect it. And the way to do that is slowly over decades to move all heavy industry, all polluting industry out into space.
I know everyone points this out, but he really does kind of resemble Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor in that Superman film that came out a few years ago. There is something a bit disturbing about that. Oh, another thing to point out is the dimple in the chin. This is quite interesting when people have this. Any kind of dimples. Generally people have dimples kind of on their cheeks, on their chins. These are often associated with people who have very charismatic qualities. But if they are combined with unfavourable facial features, they can actually be quite dangerous. So with dimples, we associate them with very charming, very friendly kind of people. But when we have sort of asymmetry that we do with Jeff Bezos, both in his eyes, we see it in his mouth, the low down ears. The dimples can be a sign of someone who will use their charm to manipulate others. We know if we look at his company leadership principles that he talks about becoming Earth's best employer and how he wants to. How are my fellow employees growing? Are they empowered? Are they ready? Leaders have a vision and commitment to their employees' personal success, whether that be Amazon or elsewhere. And we know that that doesn't quite marry with this part of his leadership principle, which is the frugality. When it comes to his own living expenses, I'm sure he's not very frugal at all. It's quite a shame because someone like himself who comes from a kind of more humble background, he comes from a single parent background. His mum, when she was 17, found herself a single mother. She enrolled at a college, and because she couldn't afford a babysitter, her teachers allowed her to bring the young baby Jeff into class with her. Now, would he extend such grace to one of his own workers now? If he was employing a single parent who couldn't afford a childminder to look after their kid, would he allow them to bring them to the factory floor? He also relies on a lot of immigrant labour because he feels he can pay them off cheaply. And this is despite the fact that after his father left him at the age of 2, his mum started dating a Cuban refugee. Bezos isn't his birth name. That was the birth name of his adoptive father. And now he kind of employs refugees on low wages and treats them like crap. So there's something kind of tragic about this guy, becoming so wealthy but not passing the ropes down. So I'm going to do a little caricature. I've already kind of sketched it out. Let's see if we can combine everything we've learned about Jeff into our little caricature for today. So let's do this. So he can be quite a difficult guy to capture. I've even given him a little McDonald's hat. Should he lose his fortune, he can always go back to his old employer. I'm sure they'd be happy to take him back. That actually suits him. That actually doesn't look too bad on him. So yeah, that was Jeff Bezos. Apparently one of the world's richest, if not the world's richest man. very successful, almost went into space. Here's a guy who could, if he wanted to, end world hunger. He could write off third world debt if he wanted to, but he chooses instead not to bother. He's got these ambitions to build factories in space, and that's going to be his solution to the pollution problem, and he's got all these bizarre ideas.
Let's take a look at what they might look like inside. High-speed transport, agricultural areas. They don't all have to have the same gravity. You could have a recreational one that keeps 0G so that you can go flying with your own wings.
It does actually kind of bring to mind a famous quote from Plato, and he said something along the lines of, the measure of a man is what he does with his success. So there's definitely an incongruity in the values of how he wants to present himself as this wonderful employer. His company values don't quite add up, and neither do his tax returns. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've got any ideas of people you would like to see analysed and caricatured, then please feel welcome to leave a comment. I'd be interested to see who people would like to see analysed in this kind of way. So thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you very soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Take care. Bye.
I want to thank every Amazon employee and every Amazon customer, because you guys paid for all of this.
If you don't mind,
Yes?
take the napkin so you have a free hand.
okay.
If you can mix.
Not right, like
Wait a minute. That's, here we go.
Oh, that's.